Hey everyone, I'm your name, and welcome to our corner of the internet where we geek out over history. Today we're diving into some of the most shocking historical disasters that people tried to cover up. From nuclear meltdowns to environmental catastrophes, we'll uncover stories of negligence, denial, and the brave individuals who revealed the truth. Stay tuned to uncover the truth behind these events, because sometimes the attempt to hide a disaster is a disaster in itself. Picture this, 1986, the heart of the Soviet Union. On the surface, everything is under control, a perfect picture of socialist efficiency. But then, Chernobyl happened. We all know about the explosion, the reactor core spewing radioactive material into the atmosphere. The Soviet government, in a misguided attempt to control the narrative, downplayed the severity of the disaster. They delayed evacuations, withheld information from the public, even tried to silence the scientists who knew the terrifying truth. The world watched in horror as the invisible threat of radiation spread, and the Soviet Union's facade of control crumbled. Chernobyl became a symbol of secrecy and the devastating consequences of silencing the truth. It's a stark reminder that some truths are too big to bury, and the longer you try to hide them, the more devastating the consequences. Fast forward to Bhopal, India, 1984. A cloud of toxic gas escaped from a pesticide plant engulfing the city in hours. Thousands died in their sleep, countless others suffered long-term health effects, and the corporation responsible, Union Carbide, went into damage control mode. Instead of taking responsibility, they deflected blame, minimized the impact, and even claimed the gas was merely an irritant. The people of Bhopal were left to deal with the devastating aftermath, their suffering compounded by a corporation's callous disregard for human life. The tragedy of Bhopal is a chilling reminder of the human cost of corporate greed and the importance of holding those in power accountable. It's a story of environmental injustice, where the pursuit of profit overshadowed the value of human life. It's a lesson etched in the memories of those who survived, a testament to the resilience of a community forever scarred by a disaster that could have been prevented. Let's rewind to 1912, to the story of a ship deemed unsinkable, the Titanic. This maritime marvel, a symbol of human ingenuity and opulence, met a tragic end on its maiden voyage, colliding with an iceberg in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. But even before the ship set sail, there were whispers of inadequate safety measures, of corners cut and warnings ignored. In the aftermath, as the world grappled with the enormity of the tragedy, a campaign of misinformation began. The White Star Line, eager to protect its reputation, downplayed the severity of the disaster and exaggerated the ship's safety features. The narrative shifted from corporate negligence to an act of God, leaving many to believe that the Titanic's fate was unavoidable. The sinking of the Titanic wasn't just a maritime disaster, it was a stark reminder that even the grandest human creations are vulnerable to the forces of nature and the dangers of human hubris. Chapter 4. The Great Chinese Famine, A Harvest of Silence. Our journey takes us to China, where from 1959 to 1961, a tragedy of unimaginable proportions unfolded. The Great Chinese Famine. This man-made disaster, a consequence of misguided economic policies and government mismanagement, resulted in the deaths of millions of people. Yet, the Chinese government, under Mao Zedong, went to great lengths to conceal the true extent of the famine from the world. Statistics were manipulated, reports were suppressed, and any mention of the famine was met with swift and brutal censorship. The world remained largely unaware of the scale of the suffering, as millions perished in silence. The Great Chinese Famine stands as a chilling reminder of the human cost of totalitarian regimes and the devastating consequences of silencing dissent. It's a story of government control, where the truth was sacrificed at the altar of political expediency. Chapter 5. Exxon Valdez Black Tide, Black Lies. 1989, Prince William Sound, Alaska. A pristine ecosystem, home to a delicate balance of marine life, was forever changed by the Exxon Valdez oil spill. When the oil tanker began spewing millions of gallons of crude oil into the pristine waters, the environmental impact was immediate and catastrophic. But instead of taking swift and decisive action, Exxon Corporation, driven by a desire to protect its bottom line, engaged in a campaign of denial and obfuscation. They downplayed the extent of the damage, shifted blame to the captain of the ship, and even attempted to buy the silence of scientists studying the long-term ecological consequences. The Exxon Valdez oil spill wasn't just an environmental disaster, it was a PR nightmare that exposed the callous disregard for the environment often displayed by powerful corporations. It highlighted the need for stronger environmental regulations and the importance of holding corporations accountable for their actions. Chapter 6. 3 Mile Island, Nuclear Fears and Muted Alarms. In 1979, the most serious nuclear accident in U.S. history occurred at 3 Mile Island. A partial meltdown sent shockwaves through the nation, raising concerns about nuclear energy. Officials downplayed the severity, assuring the public of minimal danger. The reality was far more serious, with potential consequences too terrifying to contemplate. 3 Mile Island became a turning point, fueling the anti-nuclear movement. Chapter 7. Challenger, a space tragedy, earthly cover-ups. In 1986, the world watched in horror as the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded just seconds after liftoff, claiming the lives of all 7 astronauts on board. This national tragedy sent shockwaves through the United States, shattering the image of NASA's invincibility and raising serious questions about the safety of the space program. But as the investigation into the disaster unfolded, it became apparent that NASA had been aware of potential problems with the shuttle's O-rings, but had chosen to proceed with the launch anyway. Instead of acknowledging their mistakes, NASA officials engaged in a pattern of denial and obfuscation, attempting to downplay their role in the tragedy. The Rogers Commission, appointed to investigate the disaster, uncovered a culture of complacency and a disregard for safety protocols within NASA. The Challenger disaster wasn't just a space tragedy, it was a failure of leadership and a betrayal of public trust. It exposed the dangers of prioritizing ambition over safety and the importance of learning from our mistakes, even when they are costly. Chapter 8. Deepwater Horizon, an oil spill too deep to hide. In 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig exploded, causing the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. Millions of gallons of crude oil gushed into the Gulf, devastating marine life and coastal ecosystems. BP downplayed the severity, claiming a lower flow rate. But the oil kept gushing, and the world was watching. The spill exposed the risks of offshore drilling and corporate negligence. It highlighted the need for stronger environmental regulations. Chapter 9. Fukushima, Meltdown in the Land of the Rising Sun. In 2011, the world watched in horror as a massive earthquake and tsunami struck Japan, triggering a nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant. The meltdown of 3 reactors released radioactive material into the environment, forcing the evacuation of tens of thousands of people and raising concerns about the long-term health effects of the disaster. The Japanese government and Tokyo Electric Power Company, the operator of the plant, initially downplayed the severity of the disaster, claiming that the situation was under control. However, as the crisis unfolded, it became clear that they were struggling to contain the damage, and that the full extent of the disaster was unknown. The Fukushima nuclear disaster shook the world's confidence in nuclear power, highlighting the potential dangers of this technology, especially in seismically active regions. It exposed the challenges of managing a nuclear crisis, and the importance of transparency and communication in such situations. Chapter 10. Love Canal, Buried Secrets, Toxic Truths. Our journey concludes in Love Canal, New York, where in the 1970s a community was rocked by the discovery that their homes had been built on top of a toxic waste dump. For years, residents had complained about strange odors, health problems, and a high incidence of birth defects, but their concerns were ignored. The Hooker Chemical Company, responsible for dumping thousands of tons of hazardous waste in the area, had sold the land to the city, knowing that it was contaminated. As the truth about Love Canal came to light, it sparked a national outcry and helped galvanize the environmental justice movement. It exposed the dangers of industrial pollution and the need for stricter regulations to protect public health. Love Canal wasn't just an environmental disaster, it was a betrayal of trust and a violation of human rights. It highlighted the importance of community activism, investigative journalism, and holding corporations accountable for their actions. Outro: unearthing the truth lessons from history's hidden disasters. From the radioactive ruins of Chernobyl to the oil-soaked shores of the Gulf of Mexico, these disasters and the attempts to cover them up serve as a stark reminder of the importance of truth, transparency, and accountability. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's hidden truths. See you next time.